Poland, September 1939. The German foe begins its ruthless march of conquest and sets the stage for World War II.
What if Hitler had won the war before it really started? What if Britain had fallen just like France? Between 1939 and 1941, Hitler's army crushed Europe at an unbelievable speed. Countries fell in weeks. France surrendered in just 6, and the British barely escaped from Dunkirk. But was it all because of his military genius, or did the Allies make mistakes that helped him? Why was Hitler so successful in the early years of World War II? Let's find out. When Germany stormed into Poland on September 1st, 1939, it wasn't just another invasion. It was a shockwave that sent the world reeling. This was Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War, a strategy built on speed, firepower, and total battlefield domination. Unlike the slow trench-filled slog of World War I, Blitzkrieg was designed to overwhelm the enemy before they could even react. Poland never stood a chance. Their army still relied on outdated tactics, brave cavalry charges against tanks, an air force full of aging planes, and roads that weren't built for a mechanized war. Meanwhile, the Germans had spent years perfecting a new way to fight. Tanks, infantry, and aircraft didn't just move. They worked together in a single unstoppable strike. The result? Poland was crushed in weeks, and the world realized that war had changed forever. The Luftwaffe didn't just support Germany's invasion of Poland. It led the charge. Bombers tore through roads, bridges, and railways, cutting off Polish reinforcements before they could even mobilize. Military bases, government buildings, and entire cities were hit with relentless air raids, leaving the Polish army stranded and civilians in chaos. Many Polish planes never even left the ground, destroyed before their pilots could fight back. Then came Warsaw. The capital was bombed into submission, with entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble. Hospitals, landmarks, and homes were obliterated. The Polish government saw the writing on the wall and fled the country. On September 27th, Warsaw surrendered. But by early October, it was over. 5 weeks, that's all it took. But Germany's success wasn't just about firepower, it was about strategy. Hitler knew that fighting a war on 2 fronts was a mistake. He needed to keep the Soviet Union out of the fight. So just before the invasion, he made a secret deal with Stalin. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact stunned the world. Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, 2 sworn enemies, had agreed not to attack each other. What no one knew yet was they had also agreed to carve up Eastern Europe. Stalin wasted no time taking his share. On September 17th, while Polish forces were still desperately trying to stop the Germans, Soviet troops stormed in from the east. The Polish army, already overwhelmed, had no chance of stopping a second invasion. Whole regions fell without a fight. Towns were abandoned, and commanders had no choice but to surrender or retreat. Poland never stood a chance, not against 2 of the world's most powerful armies closing in from both sides. By early October, Poland was gone, carved up between Germany and the Soviet Union, just as Hitler and Stalin had secretly planned. The world watched in shock as an entire nation disappeared in 2 weeks. But while Stalin saw this as a win, Hitler was already thinking ahead. He never saw the Soviet Union as a real ally, just a temporary convenience to secure his eastern border while he set his sights on Western Europe. After Poland fell, Hitler expected Britain and France to surrender or negotiate peace. Instead, they declared war. This put him in a tough position. Germany's military had just proven itself, but the country wasn't ready for long war with the West. What followed was months of eerie silence, a period later called the Phony War. Both sides stood ready, but no one made a move. British and French forces lined up along the French-German border, waiting for an attack that never came. Germany, meanwhile, was also holding back, using the time to rebuild and strategize. Hitler wanted to strike first, but he needed the right moment. The Allies hesitated. Some feared attacking Germany head-on would be too costly. Others thought it was better to wait and build up their forces. The result? Inaction. And while they debated, Hitler prepared. Then, in April 1940, he struck. Operation Weserübung, the invasion of Denmark and Norway, began. Denmark surrendered within hours, knowing resistance was hopeless, but Norway was different. Norway was key to Hitler's war plans. Its port gave Germany access to the North Atlantic, making it easier to move troops and supplies. More importantly, it was a gateway to Sweden's iron ore, a resource Germany desperately needed. If Britain controlled Norway, it could cut off the supply, crippling Germany's war machine. Hitler couldn't let that happen. The British saw the danger, but their response was slow and chaotic. By the time British and French forces landed in Norway, German troops had already secured key locations. Paratroopers took control of airfields. The German Navy landed reinforcements. The battle for Norway dragged on just over 2 months, but in the end, the outcome was clear. Germany won. The fall of Norway had major consequences far beyond that battlefield. In Britain, Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain faced intense criticism. His earlier policy of appeasing Hitler had already made him unpopular, but the disaster in Norway sealed his fate. He lost the confidence of Parliament and was forced to resign. In his place, a new leader took charge, Winston Churchill. But Hitler's biggest gamble was just beginning, the takeover of Western Europe. France and Britain had been getting ready for war since 1939, but they were expecting a slow-moving conflict like World War I. They thought Germany would attack head-on, so France built the Maginot Line, a massive system of bunkers, walls, and heavy artillery designed to block any invasion. It was supposed to keep France safe. But Hitler had no plans to go through with the Maginot Line. Instead, he tricked the Allies. He sent some of his forces through Belgium, making Britain and France believe they were stopping the real attack. Meanwhile, his main army was already moving through the Ardennes, a dense forest that the Allies thought was too difficult for tanks to cross. Hitler's top generals, including Erich von Manstein and Heinz Guderian, led the attack through the forest with surprising speed. German tanks moved fast, breaking through the weak defenses and heading straight for the English Channel. The Allies were completely caught off guard. They had expected a long battle, but Germany was already surrounding them before they had time to react. The French army, once considered one of the strongest in the world, fell apart. German forces outmaneuvered them, trapping entire units. Within days, the British Expeditionary Force and thousands of French troops were backed into a corner at Dunkirk. They had nowhere to go, but if Hitler had pushed forward immediately, the British army might have been destroyed. But he waited, giving Britain time to launch a desperate evacuation. In what became known as the Miracle of Dunkirk, over 300,000 soldiers were rescued and taken back to Britain. But it was still a German victory. The British escaped, but they left behind nearly all their equipment, and France was still collapsing. On June 14, 1940, German troops entered Paris. A week later, France surrendered. In just 6 weeks, Germany had done what it couldn't do in 4 years during World War I. Hitler was now in control of almost all of Western Europe. But Britain was still standing. Hitler assumed they would surrender, but Winston Churchill refused. The Royal Navy made a German invasion nearly impossible, and the Royal Air Force was already to fight back. The Battle of Britain was about to begin. So Hitler set his sights on controlling the skies. He knew that if Germany wanted to invade Britain, it first had to destroy the Royal Air Force, and so in July 1940, the Luftwaffe launched the Battle of Britain. At first, the plan was working. German bombers targeted British airfields, radar stations, and aircraft factories. The RAF was struggling to keep up, losing pilots and planes at an alarming rate. It was a battle of endurance, and Britain was barely hanging on. But then something unexpected happened. A lone German bomber, lost from its squadron, accidentally dropped its payload on London. Churchill saw this as an opportunity. He ordered an immediate retaliatory airstrike on Berlin. The attack didn't do much physical damage, but it shattered Hitler's confidence. Furious, Hitler abandoned his original strategy. Instead of contributing to target the RAF's airfields, where he had the upper hand, he ordered the Luftwaffe to bomb British cities in a campaign known as the Blitz. This was a critical mistake. While London and other cities suffered immense destruction, the change in tactics gave the RAF the time it desperately needed to recover. Britain's superior radar system, combined with improved air tactics, allowed them to push back. By mid-September, the Luftwaffe had suffered heavy losses. Germany had lost the Battle of Britain. Without air superiority, Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Britain, was cancelled. For the first time, Hitler had been stopped. Instead of finishing off Britain, Hitler turned his sights east. He had always seen the Soviet Union as his ultimate target, a land rich in resources and an ideological enemy. He believed conquering it would make Germany unstoppable. With Britain refusing to surrender, he decided to strike earlier than planned. On June 22, 1941, he launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history. Over 3 million German soldiers stormed into the Soviet territory, catching the Red Army completely off guard. But Hitler made a fatal mistake. He underestimated the Soviet Union. He thought the war would be over in months, assuming the Soviet system would collapse once the Germans kicked the door. He was wrong. As winter set in, German troops faced freezing temperatures with no winter gear. In December 1941, fresh Soviet reinforcements from Serbia arrived just in time. Hitler's dream of a quick victory was shattered. Then, days later, came another disaster. On December 7th, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Hitler, eager to strengthen ties with Japan, declared war on the US on December 11th. It was his biggest mistake yet. The United States had the world's largest industrial power. Once fully mobilized, it could outproduce Germany in tanks, planes, and weapons at an unstoppable rate. What began as a European war had just become a global one that Hitler could no longer control. So why was Hitler so successful in the early years of World War II? It wasn't just Blitzkrieg. It was about timing, risk-taking, and taking advantage of his enemies' weaknesses. He moved faster than anyone expected. He struck when the Allies were unprepared, and for a while it seemed like nothing could stop him. But his greatest flaw was his own arrogance. He refused to listen to advice. He made reckless decisions based on ideology rather than strategy, and the same boldness that had brought him so many early victories would ultimately lead to his downfall. Because in war, winning the first battles doesn't matter. Winning the last one does.